When video cameras became widely accessible and affordable to the public in the mid-1900s, the world saw an influx of independently made movies that would be created from the camera owner's home. While most home videos are merely fun little pieces of family history, others have a much more sinister tone, and some of these have been completely banned from the public because of how disturbing they are. So that's what we're going to be having a look at today. So here are 6 terrifying home videos that you are banned from watching. Number 1. The Malka tapes. Carla Malka and her husband Paul Bernardo were 2 serial killers who were responsible for the killings of at least 3 minors in the early 1990s. At a family Christmas party, the couple drugged Malka's sister Tammy, who Bernardo had become obsessed with a few months prior. The couple sexually assaulted Tammy while she slept, and before Tammy could regain consciousness, she choked on her own vomit and died. Although the local police were suspicious of the 2, they decided to let them go, and the pair wouldn't be arrested until over 2 years later. So, in 1993, a very discussed and talked about trial began where the couple were being tried on multiple charges. In order to ensure that Bernardo would spend the rest of his life in jail, Malka agreed to a very controversial plea deal where she stated that he was the main assailant of these murders and that she was just an unwilling accomplice. This led to Malka receiving a reduced sentence of only 12 years for her crimes. But it was around the same time that a videotape began to surface of the 2 committing one of these murders, and it was clear that Carla Malka had lied about her involvement in these acts, as the tapes clearly showed her attacking and sexually assaulting her victims. While the tapes were never released to the public, transcripts of the videos were, and the public were infuriated to learn that this killer had been given such a soft sentence. Even the couple's lawyer, who was the first ever person to watch the tapes, says that he plays them in his head every single day, and that he was traumatized after watching them. Well, the tapes will never be watched by another person because they were destroyed in 2001 and no other copies exist. Unfortunately, their existence made pretty much no difference in the trial, because even though the tapes incriminated Malka, her plea deal, which became known as the Deal with the Devil, was still honored, and she was released from prison in 2005. Number 2. The Basement Tapes. On the 20th of April 1999, 2 high school students known as Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris murdered 13 people at their local high school in Columbine, Colorado. The massacre sparked numerous debates and was discussed all over America for several reasons. One of these reasons was the large amount of documentation that the pair left behind. These included journal entries, blog posts, and more. In 1999, Time magazine released an article that stated there were 5 videotapes left behind by the pair that showed their preparations, ideas, and thoughts. These recordings became known as the basement tapes, and 2 of them were later released. One showed the pair shooting in a mountain range, and the other was a short film they created known as Hitmen for Hire. The other 3 tapes were never released because of a court order, but transcripts of the tapes were released, and it was clear that the remaining tapes gave a substantial amount of insight into the minds of these killers as they discussed, prepared, and planned for their attack. There has been a lot of talk as to whether or not these tapes should be released, but as of now, the court order stands and the tapes remain banned from the public eye. Number 3. Groupie. In 1996, shock rocker Marilyn Manson was a cultural phenomenon who had sold millions of records and garnered a large amount of controversy for his shocking image and lyrics. On top of his music, Manson ventured into an array of creative endeavors that included paintings, poetry, and fashion. At the same time of his meteoric rise, Manson created the experimental short film known as Groupie that centered around a house party he threw where he invited a female actor to the event and filmed himself and several of his bandmates performing perverse sexual acts on the actress that included bondage, drinking urine, and more. The other partygoers did not know if the actress was an unwilling participant or a part of the performance and were made uncomfortable by the strange things that she was told to do. The actual short film was only ever seen by 3 people: Manson's manager Tony Coilla, comedian Andy Dick, and Marilyn himself. Coilla urged Manson to never release the piece to the public as he feared that it could easily be used against him in a court of law. This was probably the reason the movie was never fully released, but segments of it were eventually released in later years. Manson's imagery has always been quite disturbing and graphic, so one can only imagine what must have been on this tape to stop its release. The fate of the short film remains unknown, but it's probable that it was destroyed due to its graphic nature. Number 4. The Slifkin Recordings. Anatoly Slivka was a Soviet serial killer who was responsible for killing 7 young boys between the years of 1964 and 1985. He did this because in 1961, he witnessed a traffic accident where a young boy died and stated that he got some kind of sexual pleasure from it. In order to recreate this pleasure, he ran a children's club and would convince some of the young boys to take part in an experiment which would involve them being put unconscious. Slivka would then strip them naked and arrange them in various different positions. He would also videotape this activity so that he could masturbate to it later. Slivka did this numerous times and in 1964 accidentally killed his first victim. However, this gave him a taste for murder and Anatoly Slivka would go on to kill 6 more young boys. While some of the video recordings were kept and later discovered, Slivka destroyed the initial tape and many more for fear of being caught. These tapes are obviously not viewable to the public, and there are hours of recordings that are also inaccessible for public viewing due to court orders. Anatoly Slivka was arrested in 1985 and executed in 1989 by firing squad. Number 5. The Meiwes Tape. Armin Meiwes is a convicted murderer who we have actually covered in a different video where we talked about disturbing internet communities. The community in question was known as the Cannibal Cafe, which Armin used to contact a man who wanted to voluntarily be killed and eaten. This man, Bernd Brandis, went to Armin's house and the two recorded a videotape that showed Meiwes cutting off Berdt's penis and attempting to eat it. He then killed Brandis by slitting his throat, and over the next 10 months, Meiwes proceeded to eat various pieces of Berdt's body and stored it inside of his home. In 2002, Meiwes was arrested and charged with the murder when the advertisement was discovered online and Berdt's body parts were also found. On top of this, the 4-hour video recording they had made was recovered and showed the entire event. Lawyers and court officials who saw the footage couldn't believe what they had just watched, and the footage was never released to the public. It was so disturbing and graphic that many of the jury and journalists needed therapy after watching it, and as of today, it is being held by authorities in Germany and will probably never see a public release. Number 6. The Parker Ray Tapes. David Parker Ray was an American serial killer, dubbed the Toy Box Killer, who was suspected to have murdered up to 60 people. He often tortured his victims in a renovated, soundproof trailer that he called the Toy Box. Inside of this trailer were dozens of torture tools that were estimated to be worth over $100,000, and before torturing his victims, he would play them an audio recording that would give them an idea of what he was going to do to them. On top of this, Ray would record many of these crimes, and after he was arrested in 1999, several of these videos were discovered, but it's presumed that many more were never found or were destroyed by Ray himself before they could be recovered. One of the tapes that police did eventually find showed Ray torturing one of his victims, a young woman known as Kelly Garrett, who had her throat slit and was dumped on the side of the road. Ray assumed she had killed her, but she actually survived and was treated for her injuries. Strangely, when she told the police and her husband what had happened, nobody believed her, and Ray's killing spree continued for almost 3 more years until he was eventually caught. These tapes helped prove Kelly's story, but were a haunting reminder of an extremely dark time, and for obvious reasons, this video remained in the hands of the authorities and was never released to the public. And that's all for today's video. Thanks a million for watching. I try and make a creepy list like this every week, so if you want to subscribe for that, you can. The footage, music, and sources used will all be linked down below in the description. You can also follow me over on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, all of which are DeBurk321. But like I said, that's all for now. As always, until next time.